This episode of Plastic Weekly is brought to you by my parents, Sharon and Warren Norton, and the rest of my Patreon supporters who help make this show by donating $1 or two each week. I know for sure my mom and dad don't understand half of what this show talks about, but I'm guessing they donate because I'm a crappy son and it's the only way they can regularly hear my voice. I'm sorry I never call, but anyway, if you see a white Mazda out on the road with a Plastic Weekly sticker on the back, that's probably my mom or dad. So thanks for helping me out, and I love you guys. Back at the end of July, Toronto was home to an event called the Climbing Medicine Symposium, which unfortunately I wasn't able to attend, but I heard a bunch of great stuff from other people who managed to get tickets, so I thought I'd catch up with the creator of the event, Yasser El-Sheikh, to learn the story behind it. This episode was recorded in mid-September, so if I say anything that doesn't line up regarding the timeline, it's because it's airing over a month later. But first, the Pan Am Youth Championships are coming up. They run from October 30th to November 5th, and they need your help. Last I heard is a bunch of volunteers from South America can no longer come, so the organizers really need help with volunteers. If you're in town that week, please visit climbingpanam2017.com to offer your help for a shift or two of judging. Additionally, the organizers are hoping to live stream the entire event so that we can all watch from our own homes, but they need to raise some funds to make it happen. So consider supporting their crowdfunding campaign, which you can also find at climbingpanam2017.com. If I'm lucky, maybe I'll get to host a live stream. I think that'd be pretty cool. But anyway, let's get to the interview. Yasser El-Sheikh, thanks very much for taking some time to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. The first thing I wanted to ask, just to get an idea of where we sit, is you're a climber, obviously. How would you describe yourself as a climber, and what's your climbing background?
I would say I'm a sport climber. I've been climbing, about 27 years. I started in the early 90s, was on the national team for a few years back then, and it's sort of transitioned into my profession and a serious hobby since then. So
have you always been Toronto based?
I have been, yeah, born and raised in Toronto. I've been around for school. I was on the West Coast for a couple of years at UBC, and I was in California for a couple of years for hand surgery training. But other than that, I've been in the Greater Toronto area.
Okay, and then you kind of hinted to it, but who are you professionally?
I'm a plastic surgeon, so I do general plastic surgery, but also my subspecialty is in hand, wrist, and nerve surgery. And then in terms of climbing medicine, I do mostly climbing medicine related to hand and wrist injuries.
Okay. This past summer, just about I guess a month and a half ago, you hosted and organized something called the Canadian Climbing Medicine Symposium. The title is pretty self-explanatory, but can you tell me a bit about that event?
Yeah, sure. It's well, it was very exciting for us. It was the first event of its kind in North America, not the first in the world. There have been similar events in Europe, in England and Germany, namely. But this was a group, a gathering over 2 days of about 50 people, allied health professionals, physicians, surgeons, coaches, climbers, gym owners. So a pretty multidisciplinary group, therapists, strength trainers, with a common interest of wanting to better our sport and make our athletes healthier and stronger. So we got together and shared ideas and did a bunch of talks on topics related to climbing and performance.
And then who were some of the people presenting at this?
Mm-hmm. So there were the keynote speakers, other than myself, were Professor Volker Schofel and Dr. Isa Schofel. So they work with the German climbing team as I am here working with the Canadian climbing team. They're the team doctors there. And Volker Schofer really is, I would say he's my mentor in terms of climbing medicine. He's about 10 years my senior, and before even meeting him, much of the research done in the 90s and early 2000s was his work. So they joined us, along with Eric Hurst, who did an excellent talk on training for climbing, and another local wrist surgeon. His name is Herb von Schroeder. He did a talk on wrist pathology in climbers. And then there were many others. There were 15 speakers and 19 talks. So there were many talks from local and international professionals as well.
Very cool. You mentioned that there had been events like this out in Europe. How did the event kind of come to be? And I'm guessing it's something you've probably wanted to do, or at least you've probably wanted to get a bit more medical info out to the climbing community for a while. But how did everything lead to this symposium?
Yes, so I've been attending similar meetings for about 6 years now, and researching climbing medicine on my own since before I was in medicine. So, as an undergraduate over 20 years ago, these similar meetings in Europe started about 10 years ago, and I went to the first one myself in Frankenjura, Germany. It was the first English language meeting that they held on climbing injuries. And then from that, after going to several, I went to 3 meetings in Europe. I decided that definitely there'd be a need in our country. There's certainly many people interested in climbing medicine and performance in Canada. And now with the upcoming Olympics, climbing being in the Olympics 2 years from now, it's even there's even more of a push, even on a government and policy level, to have people educated on climbing injuries and climbing performance. So that's how it came to be. And we started a planning committee meeting. The first meeting was 18 months ago, and we were working very hard for over a year to put this together, myself and the planning committee.
How has the information about climbing medicine changed since those first trips you made out to Frankenjura?
I would say the uh, the approach is a lot more multidisciplinary now, in terms of everyone understanding that a hand surgeon in isolation is not going to make a climber's hand healthier. It's about collaborating with other professionals as well. The climbers themselves, their coaches and trainers, their therapists before and after the injury or surgery, and we all need to work together to try and make the climbers healthier and stronger. So that was a big part of how I designed the program, was to make sure it wasn't a group of 50 physical therapists or a group of 50 surgeons in a room, right? It was a bunch of people learning from each other with their own unique perspective. And to be frank, I learn a lot more from sitting with a coach than I would sitting with another hand surgeon, or sitting with a physical therapist as opposed to a hand surgeon, for example. So that was by design. And it was to try to satisfy that need for a multidisciplinary approach.
That's interesting. You mentioned it was approximately 50 people in attendance at this. Yeah. How would you break down a lot of the people there in terms of how they were going to use that knowledge? Did you have a lot of people that were competitive athletes, or was it mostly coaches and other supportive staff, or was it mostly people in the medical profession?
That's a good question. So it ended up being about 50% healthcare providers. So that would be physicians, massage therapists, physical therapists, chiropractors. And then another 25% were other support people. So that would be coaches and trainers, route setters, gym owners. And then another 25% were the athletes themselves, or just lay people with an interest. So even some parents of the athletes, some gym owners who are not athletes themselves, but just want to know how to make a safer gym environment. So that was the breakdown. So 50% healthcare and then 50% other.
So if somebody is somewhere else in, in the States or somewhere else was going to host an event like this, would that kind of indicate that an important part of marketing the event would be going to healthcare providers in the area who may not have a climbing connection? I kind of assume a lot of the providers at your conference were likely, involved in the climbing community, even, maybe only as recreational climbers themselves. But were there some of them that were just there to kind of improve their practice from an outside perspective?
At our meeting was mostly people who had firsthand interest in climbing, and we sort of, in terms of marketing this, we marketed, through social media and climbing magazines. It was more marketing to the climbing community, and then from the climbing community came the people with an interest in training and healthcare, as opposed to going beyond our community. And that's the logical next step. But the reality is, we are still a small sport, and we thought we'd get the biggest bang for our buck by finding the people that are already working with the athletes.
For yourself, what would you consider some of the high points of the conference in terms of kind of ideas or presentations that were made by the experts?
Mhm. I think one of the most interesting things was and a young engineer climber from Montreal, Felix Bourassa Moreau, did a presentation on a finger force monitoring device that he's developed on his own in a lab that comes with an app for your phone, and it can basically measure individual forces of your fingers, which has applications both for training and performance and also rehabilitation protocols. For example, when we want to gradually start loading an injured finger to allow the tissues to heal in a gradual fashion, we can use that device to determine what X percent of maximum force would be, for example. So it has great applications, and it's very portable. I think it's something we're going to see in climbing gyms and clinics in the near future.
That's really cool. It's measuring each finger individually.
Yeah, it can do combined or individual.
Okay, that's really
Yes.
cool.
Yeah. The other notice I'm talking a lot about the non-hand surgery things, and there were a lot of hand surgery things, but the things that really resonated for me were the non-hand surgical things, because it's not my area of expertise. But um, Jerry Banning, he's an aging climber. I would not say an old climber, but he did a great talk on how to stay healthy and continue progressing through the ages, through the years. So that was a good talk on performance. And then there was another one that's a combined sort of performance and rehab talk that was by Dr. Natasha Barnes, who's a chiropractor in San Francisco, and was a pro climber and national team climber herself. And she talked about barbell therapy, which is rehab through doing the big Olympic lifts, so deadlifting and back squatting and all of those really heavy lifts to try to rehab legs and arms and shoulders.
Interesting.
Mhm.
From your perspective, as somebody that's been climbing for a long time, and in fact, climbing seems to have introduced you to the medical world. When you walk into a climbing gym or into today's climbing culture, what concerns you the most from the medical end of things?
That's a very good question. Uh, my talk at the meeting was on growth plate fractures in young climbers and a novel technique for treating this surgically. Um, and so, what concerns me the most, and there were several talks on these fractures, on how frequent they're occurring and how to look after them. So, my biggest concern would be that we're all getting stronger faster, and young athletes are climbing at a level today that grown men and women of the 90s were climbing at. You look at Adam Ondra, who just climbed, our first 50D a couple of weeks ago. When he was 13, he was climbing 9A, and that was the leading edge just 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So his growth plates in those fingers are really, they're being exposed to a load that's unprecedented. It's nothing like anything we experienced in the earlier stages of sport climbing. So my worry is that people are not going to be aware of this injury and the risks that climbing poses to skeletally immature athletes. So athletes that are young enough that their finger growth plates haven't fused yet.
I'm going to ask a follow-up before I do. Could you very briefly explain to anybody that isn't sure what a growth plate is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so long bones, so they are what they sound like they are. So the bones in your body they're not flat, they're tubular, and they have a top and a bottom, if you will, and a shaft. Those long bones have a growth plate, usually at one end, that is responsible for the longitudinal growth of the bone. So the bone, when you grow in height, it's from the bone cells developing at that growth plate. And that growth plate at certain times in your development becomes an area of high stress and an area that's vulnerable to fracture. And it doesn't, a bone can break and heal in an adult, and it won't change the shape of the bone or the length of it. But if an unrecognized fracture of a growth plate in a kid that's still growing can lead to significant deformities in that finger if it's left to fester and doesn't heal properly.
So the growth plate idea, I know there was an athlete out west a few years ago, a youth athlete who developed a growth plate injury, and I think between his parents and whoever his physicians were, they wrote up a bit of a report that got disseminated across the Canadian industry, kind of to raise awareness of it. And so I know that's something for myself and the other coaches I worked with over the last few years. We were aware of it, mentally, but without the, medical expertise and without having been exposed to it ourselves, it always felt like kind of this specter behind us that was, could strike at any moment. But we felt fairly unprepared or unable to kind of do much about preventing that in our athletes. It was something that, you always just hoped wouldn't happen, and you only felt like you could, tone down training and hope it wouldn't come up. So for somebody like me that's really looking for, just, some encouragement that we're doing okay, is there anything like solid action that can be taken proactively to help out all of those coaches out there who really don't have a lot of experience with that?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it. And I'm going to give you the punchline of my talk, basically.
All right.
So for everyone to hear, but if you haven't heard this already, if you are a young athlete or working with a young athlete, they shouldn't have pain in their fingers for more than a day. I'm an aging athlete, a middle-aged athlete. I climb as much as my body can handle. I'm still progressing. I'm stronger in my 40s than I was in my 30s, but I'm in pain all the time. And that's normal for me. But for a kid, a 12-year-old boy, a 13-year-old girl, if they have pain in a specific finger that persists for more than a week, they need to take a step back and be assessed. So the two options at that point are take a week off and let that pain go away. And if it doesn't go away, you need to see a health professional right away for assessment.
That's exactly the kind of stuff I want to hear. That's really interesting. Thanks for that.
I would say you did ask about prevention too, and that's a harder thing to answer because climbing, like any sport, is it's not great for your body. Pushing your body causes a lot of abnormal stresses, and then the stresses on the hands in climbers are just not natural. So I think vigilance and awareness of when to get help or when to worry about this injury is more important than trying to prevent it. Because it's very difficult to prevent it in an athlete that's working really hard to get better. It's really hard to slow these kids down. That being said, some rules that we have are no campus boarding for kids that are skeletally immature. So that's a good rule. No campusing or weighted hangs.
I didn't want to delve too far into this. I'll ask one more on this. As you know, the world of competitive climbing becomes bigger and bigger, and we are seeing kids getting stronger at a younger age. Do you like, because there will be coaches out there who will push into those areas of campus boarding and even some weighted exercises, so long as they're not running into resistance. And whenever that happens, when you get that one kid or those couple of kids that manage to progress through those things at a young age, it obviously has a mental effect on everybody else saying, well, maybe it is okay.
Yes.
Do you feel like competitive sports and medical advice will always be butting head to head when it comes to people like that?
Well, I think ideally you have healthcare providers that understand the sport and understand the mentality of an athlete and maybe our athletes themselves. So, for example, when I'm talking to a young athlete, I don't tell them do not campus board or stop climbing for 6 weeks, because you're taking their whole life away when you do that for a young kid. That's their whole world. And you understand as an athlete that that's not a practical solution to anything. So it's all about balance, like many things in life. It's about being aware that that injury is out there and being able to know when the signs of potential danger are there. There are many kids that are going to campus board despite what their coaches say. And we're talking about campusing now, but to be frank, you can avoid campusing and not avoid this injury. Many of the people, most in fact, of the kids that I've treated with this injury were not campusing. They were just doing a lot of high volume, high intensity bouldering, and the repetitive stress on the fingers was enough to cause the fracture. So that's why I'm spending a little less time talking about prevention and more about understanding what the injury is, how to recognize it, and then certainly if it's recognized, knowing when to back off and let things heal.
All right. Based off of all of the feedback I've heard from some of the folks that were at the conference, and also based on what you've been talking about, it sounds like the event was a great success, especially for the first time it's been held. Is it something that you're encouraged to do again next year, or how do you see the future of the event evolving?
It's not, well, as I already mentioned, it took 18 months to put the thing together. It's definitely not going to be next year. But we are hoping to be doing this just unofficially now, hoping to be doing this every other year. And so 2019 would be the next one, and the location is to be determined at this point.
Okay. When you look forward to that next event, is there anything that you see from the event you just hosted and are hoping to change or improve?
We sold out very quickly. And we sold out quickly for two reasons. The venue was not, we were at capacity, but at the same time, we didn't want it to be hundreds of people because this was the first event. We wanted to make it good. And we spent a lot of time putting all of the processes in place that will be helpful for future events. So now that that learning curve is over for us, we feel comfortable holding a bigger event if the demand is there, and I think it will be.
All right. If there's anybody curious about reaching out to you or finding the website for the event for their own curiosity, where can they find that info?
The event website is climbingmedicine.com. So, and they can reach us through the email at that website actually, and we've been getting tons of feedback and emails from people who attended and people who were unable to attend, and we read every one. And we also have an email listserv that we're adding to almost daily. So you can reach us at that website, and if you want to be a part of our email, our mailing list, we can add you to that so that you'll be made aware of future events.
And then at the end of it, is there anybody, after hosting a big event like this, is there anybody else that you want to thank for putting it all together?
So yeah, definitely none of this would have happened without the planning committee, the volunteers, and our sponsors. So our planning committee was Casey Wilson and Kate Evans, and they worked tirelessly for a year plus with me. So thank you so much for your help, guys. Also, Felix Borasamaro and Raul Sapra were volunteers on site. So thanks, guys, for helping us out this year. And then our sponsors and corporate partners. So Landmark Capital Limited, Joe Rockhead's Climbing Gym, Climbing Medicine Canada, Gripped Magazine, Becton Dickinson Medical, Mountain Equipment Co-op, Arthrex, and Working Model. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you in a couple of years, I hope.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for hosting such a great event in this part of the country. I know a lot of people took away a lot of information from it. So thanks for doing that. And again, thanks for taking this time to explain it to all of us.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
That's it for this week's episode of Plastic Weekly. Thanks to Yasser El-Sheikh for taking time out of his busy surgeon schedule to answer my questions, and thanks to you guys for listening. Plastic Weekly is presented and produced by me, Tyler Norton. If you like this episode, please consider donating $1 or $2 each week to my Patreon at patreon.com/plasticweekly, or just take a moment to leave a rating and review in your podcast app. You've got no idea how much those help me out. Make sure you visit plasticweekly.com to find footnotes, references, and other bonus content related to our episodes, including photos from this event. If you want to get in touch with me, you can leave a comment at plasticweekly.com, and you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can send me an email to tyler@plasticweekly.com with your comments, concerns, questions, compliments. Just tell me you're out there. Somewhere. Good luck to everyone competing this weekend, including at the Yankin Yard in Albuquerque and at locals in Ontario, Quebec, and across the USA. We'll be thinking about you. Talk to you next week.